Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage, and what we're going to be doing today is replacing the starter on the 1999 Acura RL. So stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, I just want to welcome you here, and hopefully you'll consider subscribing if you like what you see. Also, check out Car Apprentice on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I post lots of pictures and videos on those platforms before I post anything on YouTube. And occasionally I'll post things on those platforms I don't post on YouTube. Also, check out the website at carapprentice.com. And don't forget to hit the like button if you like this video. So I've been putting off the starter replacement on the Acura RL for a number of years. And usually the starter only acts up during the summertime, where you'll turn the key and you hear just kind of a little ting noise and it won't start. You have to do that several times and finally it will turn over. But recently, the starter started acting up during the winter time. So that was a clue to me that I really need to get that out of this car before I get stranded somewhere. The starter replacement on the Acura RL is a very involved process. It takes a lot of patience. You also need a decent arsenal of tools, so kind of be mindful of that as we go through the video here. Just kind of take note of all the tools that I'm using. I may include some timestamps because I'll be referencing other videos I've made on the channel already, so be looking out for that. Also, because I'm working on the MDX's engine in this garage, I'll be working in the driveway today, which is a little bit different setting. So you may hear some background noise, and I apologize for that, but I didn't want to spend the time trying to filter out every little bit of background noise. So you'll probably hear an occasional barking dog or a car passing by. So without further ado, let's get into replacing the starter on the 1999 Acura RL. All right, to kick this off, we're going to remove the battery. Alright, so next step is removing the alternator belt and alternator. So I've done videos on both of those procedures, one for the Acura RL and the other one for the Acura Legend. The Acura Legend is pretty much the same as the RL with regard to removing the alternator. I would just take this little bracket out. There's a couple vacuum hoses, and then you can see there's some harnesses that clip into it. Alright, so we need to get the exhaust manifold cover on this side off. There's one of the bolts there. And then the second one right down in this area here. So that's the second bolt we need to get out. I think those are both, I want to say 12 millimeter. So you probably should spray some penetrating oil on those bolts before trying to take them out. I'm going to try taking them out dry and see how that goes, since I don't have much rust at all. Okay, so that's loose. Okay, so I broke that bolt free with a breaker bar. Now I'm going to spin it out with an air ratchet, because there's very little space to get any sort of articulation. Unclip these two. Alright, so after a lot of manipulation, I think I can get this out now. I want to at least move it to the front of the car. Yeah, this is going to be fun to put back in. So unclipping this AC line gave me a little bit more space. All I did was grab the screwdriver, got it right in here, and just kind of flipped this up a little bit, and then just slid this off that way with the screwdriver. Next, I put the car on jack stands and removed the front wheels. Check out the video I made on jacking up the front end of the RL if you're unsure. I'm going to remove the driver's side damper fork so I can take out the axle. I'm straightening the cotter pin's tails that pass through the ball joint stud. Then I'll cut them off with snips and remove the remainder of the cotter pin with vice grips. Okay, so I don't think this is the original nut. It is 24 millimeters. I think I replaced this when I replaced the engine, if I remember correctly. So now you can put your castle nut on like this to protect the end of the stud, because next what we're going to do is press this out. Okay, so here's the ball joint removal tool. Got a little bit of grease here. Grease on the threads also. That's better. Alright, so that's what it looks like from this side. I'm going to try it this way. If this does not work, then I will take the tie rod out on the other side. Alright, so there's our gap we got formed. That's what we're going after. Castle nut did its job. Help protect these threads here. So we're going to spin this off and then take the ball joint out of the lower arm here. I'm using an old broken screwdriver to lift the tab that stakes the axle nut to the axle. .36 millimeter breaker bar, screwdriver. Using a sledgehammer to force the axle through the hub will collapse the threads. A plastic hammer is best, but I didn't have one, so I used a block of wood and a sledgehammer. A puller like the OEM Tools 27037, secured with lug nuts, works well. I've used it to remove the RL's driver's side axle in the past. Since I've removed the axle several times and deformed the tabs on the intermediate shaft, prying between it and the axle didn't work very well. So I turned the pry bar with the end facing up, placed it against the axle, then struck the end of the pry bar's handle with a sledgehammer. Alright, so I'm going to remove these transmission stop collar bolts. There's one here, and there's one here. Those are 14. I'm out of air. Alright, those are 12 millimeters. Going after these two here. I'm going to try it dry first. If it looks like they're not going to come off, I'm going to go to heat. And no, I don't have an impact 12 millimeter socket either. These are 14s again. If they don't come off with the impact, I'll have to go to heat. Since I just put these on about 6 or 7 years ago, I'm hoping they'll just come right off. I'll just pull this off. Alright, so I was trying to avoid using a breaker bar. I want to use impacts to really get these off. I don't want to round these nuts. But I got a 14 millimeter on a breaker bar because there's not a whole lot of space to fit in an impact and a socket in there. So we'll see how this goes. Make sure that's nice and flush on there. There we go. Okay, that's out. Alright, hopefully I got some good video here. It's hard to see what the camera's looking at. So I'm going to try an extension and a 14 impact. There's number 2 right up there. Make sure it's square on there. Took the stud out too. That one. Here's my setup for the last nut at the top. It is very hard to reach and a 14 millimeter swivel socket is required. A swivel adapter with a socket installed on it will not work. And that nut is why I ended up here. While attempting to remove it, which came out with just a little effort last time, it eventually stripped. I tried shaving down the nut with a Dremel to get a bolt out on it, but the angle in which the nut is installed above the wide pipe is, well, insane. Midas's highly experienced tech and an exhaust specialist at another shop estimated 5 hours of work, with the exhaust specialist mentioning open labor because the exhaust manifold might have to be replaced. Yeesh. So I brought the car back home to work on it some more myself. I tried a nut splitter, but access to the nut was very poor. I finally decided to concentrate on grinding down the stud with a Dremel to weaken the nut and stud connection so I could pop the wide pipe off the stud. I would then replace the stud. After grinding down the stud, I moved on to the rear exhaust nuts. So I'm limited on sockets in this area. I don't have any swivel impact sockets that are 12 millimeters, so I'm going to use this. So I'm just going to take it out the rest of the way. Okay, this is a 13. I think I might have replaced this nut at some point. I think there's probably normally a 12. And then the bolt itself is a 12. So the access is very limited here. I'm going to clean this off a little bit so it doesn't slip. Oh, goodness. That was tight. Thought I stripped it at first. I was a little nervous there. There we go. Yep, so some of the wax gets in there, as you can see. It looks good. Just enough to get it off. Alright, there's one last nut up here. I'm just kind of looking around to see the tail end of the transmission right here. I do not want to torch that. So I'm going to direct the heat that way. Just kind of looking around and making sure I'm not going to hit anything else that's aluminum under here. So that would not be good. Alright, I'm going to stop there. There's a lot of aluminum components up here, so being very careful. Alright, and then I'll wipe that off. You get a good grip on that. I think that's a 12 millimeter. There it goes. Sort of, kind of. I'm just going to take that out the rest of the way and we'll continue on. So I ground down the stud and the nut. And I finally was able to hit right in this area with a block of wood and a sledgehammer, and I got that to fracture up there and come off. So that took a very long time. Very long time. I'll emphasize very long time. So now this is ready to come out. Now you don't have to take the nuts off way up there. Just the nuts on this side. Nuts there. Nuts on this side. And then you should be able to slide the whole cat back enough to get the Y pipe off these studs over here. To make this a little bit easier, you can put some silicone paste on the hangers back there, take the cat off the hangers to lower it, and then you should have a lot of space to get this out, but that should not be necessary. So I'm going to slide it back that way. Like that. Drop this down. Try to clear this bracket here. There we go. Yeah, this is the bracket I was talking about. Looks like it's breaking off there. So we're probably going to have to replace it. So I'll see if I can find one at the salvage yard. Alright, so I'm taking a look at the damage to the Y pipe caused by grinding down that stud and that nut. Doesn't look too bad. So I'll just sand this down a little bit, and what I'll do is throw some high heat paint on it. Alright, so there is what is left of our stud. So I've got probably, I want to say, about a 5/8 of an inch maybe. So not a whole lot to work with, but I think we can get it out. Alright, we're closer to getting the starter out. I'm placing a jack with a block of wood under the oil pan because we need to remove some engine mount bolts. We'll start with these two bolts in the front. You may want to consider removing the splash shield for better access and visibility. So this clip fell out here. It's probably a good idea to take it out anyway. Alright, so the starter is right here. This is one of the connectors for it. And another one right there. We need to get this bracket off. It's an engine bracket over here. I'll show you that in a second. I'm going to take this wire harness off the bracket above here. Sorry if the camera's a little shaky. Okay, so tab up that way and then slide this off. Just going to pivot this around so it's not touching the bracket. This one up here, tab is on this side where my middle finger is. Tab up and then slide that one off. That one I'm probably going to have to do off camera because that's a hard one to reach. Okay, so here is the starter wire. I just disconnected that from the starter right there. We're going to take this one off in a bit. I want to get this bracket out of here first. This is the engine mount bracket on this side. Alright, so we're going after the top nut on the engine mount. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. I've got an assortment of extensions to reach down there with an impact 17mm socket. And everything went down. The nut fell off. I can see it down there on the ground. So pull these extensions in the socket out. Okay, 17. Alright, so hopefully you can see that. There is a bolt right there at the top. So I have a box wrench that's ratcheting, and it also has an articulating head or a swiveling head, whatever you want to call it. Alright, I'm just going to spin it out the rest of the way and we'll come back. Alright, so to get the top engine mount bracket bolt out that I was going after, I had to take this bracket off here, and to reach that you should be reaching probably through the back side of the car. Yeah, so to get to that bracket that I was just talking about, this one here, I had to reach up through this area with a 10mm to get it out. Ratcheting wrenches will serve you very well on this job, and also air tools. Alright, so right there is the next bolt. That's right in front of the steering rack. So at some point we're probably going to have to jack up the engine a little bit so that it clears the steering rack as we try to take the bolt out. But I have a ratcheting wrench on there, 17mm. We're going to try to get it out now. Alright, so I've got a couple wrenches here. Got our ratcheting wrench, and then I've got a 19mm hook to it so I can get some leverage here. I've also jacked up the engine just a little bit. So we'll see how this goes. Alright, so I was able to break it free. It took a lot of effort to get that to break free with 2 wrenches. So, still pretty tight. I'm just going to spin it out the rest of the way and we'll continue on. So I apologize for not being able to see a lot of this bolt removal all the way through. It's just there's very little space and the angles are really difficult with the camera here. I think I backed myself into a corner there. Alright, so the bracket is ready to come out. I've got it off the stud for the engine mount right there, right here. So I am going to probably have to lift the engine a little bit higher to get this bracket all the way out. I just wanted to at least get it off the stud for now, because if I try to jack up the engine with the mount on, or the bracket on that stud there, it's going to start to tilt and it's going to get caught on that stud, if that makes sense. So I'm going to try to pull it out now after I jack up the engine a little bit more, and hopefully I can pull it out this way. Alright, let's see if we can get this out now. I've jacked up the engine a little bit more. Turn this around a little bit. So kind of what it looks like right now on its way out. I'm trying to get it past the transmission. There we go, it's starting to fall down now. There we go. That was a lot of fun. So there's our starter right here. So we're gonna go after that next. Alright, so I've pulled on this little bulb right here to pull the cover off. And we are going to now take this nut off for the starter wiring. 12 millimeters. Try to get it nice and flush on there first. Don't want to strip that. There we go. Grab the nut here. Okay, so I'm going to undo this 14 millimeter right here for the starter. Out of air. There's that one. All right, 14 millimeter. That's a long one. To free the starter from the transmission's housing, hitting the solenoid with a block of wood and a sledgehammer seemed to work best. Okay. Alright, so that's where the starter lived. Once I got it out of that housing, I was able to drop it down here where the axle was and out the car.